A very warm welcome to episode 41 of Here to See the Shelburne, and it's our Women's Premier Division season review. And there's only one person we could call to run us through what was an interesting season at the Red side. A familiar voice, a face, and a true legend of the club, Seana Cooke. Welcome back, Seana. It's been a few months. How have you been?
Hi Andy, yeah, thanks for inviting me back again. Always a pleasure to join you, and just want to say thanks to you and Dunny and the guests you've had on over the course of the season for your continuous support and coverage of our women's team, but women's football in Ireland. It's very much needed and appreciated, and I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. And I know from speaking to other people across the league, it's been a great addition, not just to Shelburne, but also to the Women's League of Ireland. So thanks very much.
Oh, you're very kind, Sean. It's our pleasure. As you know, myself and Donny are not just here for the plaudits. We actually really care about the women's game. It's very much part of our agenda. We're big Reds, true and true. So we're trying to catch up with your award-winning podcast that you feature on the Toe Tap Las Damas, Shauna. We're not quite. Our budget doesn't stretch as far as their production values, but we're doing our best. And I think it's a bit of a coup to have you on with us this week. So looking
Yeah.
forward to it. And judging by the listener questions, you're going to be a busy woman this afternoon as we record. So let's get down to business. Shels again finished second in the league. Why did we come up short again this year, Shauna?
Yeah, obviously very disappointing, considering the kind of strong start we had. In terms of why we came up short, I think there's kind of a mixture of reasons for it. I think one of those being the fact that the decision was made by management to kind of have a smaller squad. I think, you know, like knowing that we are a league, for a lot of players, kind of that they see it as a kind of a transitionary league where it's either young players taking that step up before they want to go to the UK or America, or maybe players that have been abroad and come home to kind of in that hope to move away again. I just thought that was not maybe the best choice to have a smaller squad. And I just think in terms of in crucial games, I think the occasion has got the better of the sideline at times. So that's probably for me been the two big reasons as to why we finished second. But that's just my opinion, Andy.
Yeah, no, it's something that was raised myself and Donny in particular throughout the season was that Eoin Wearen and Rory Kirk had gone down that route of, as you said, having a slightly tighter squad. It's easy to look back now when you and see how things panned out. Really bad injuries to Kate Mooney, for example, Kiva Keenan, and a few others, and then we had players like Bambi Cook and Rebecca Devereux heading off back to the US. But these things happen a lot. You know, when Shels came down to the really big games, for example, the two head-to-heads against Athlone came out of those with full points. You know, Shels, lost 6 games in total across the season. Shauna, you're always in an uphill battle when you're losing more than 2 or 3 games, really.
Yeah, and I think as well, this has been the first ever time the women's team have lost 6 league games. I think that's ever in this division, which is kind of very, very disappointing. And I was having a conversation during the week where someone had said to me, but it's not a big deal. Like you lose 6 games, you still finish second, and that could be the case for a lot of other clubs, I think, across Ireland. But when you're Shelburne and you've played or you support the women's team and you know how high the standards are and how hard the players work and what they've gone through over the years, and the standards just that they hold themselves to, that losing 6 games in the league is not okay. But yeah, to your question there about Athlone, and us dropping points against Athlone, and two massive games. They're the games. You're you really want to make sure that you're not just winning but you're dominating. And yeah, I think in terms of the recent game that comes to mind, more so than anything else. I know there was kind of that gut reaction from management afterwards to again come out and kind of blame the referee. But I think when you're in that position where you're not really playing well, um, and maybe the game isn't in your full control, you do tend to do that, try to clutch at other excuses, and you tend to kind of blame the referee. But I just think in terms of when I look back on that game, like it was essentially, I think, won or lost in the first half. Yeah, we came out in the second half. There's a real gallant effort from the players. But like in terms of the tactical setup and the personnel that were picked, I just thought it was completely like all over the place. And we allowed them get a hole in the game very early on. And we know that they have the quality to punish when they're given a half a chance, or a half chance or two. And yeah, for me, again, I don't know whether it was the occasion that kind of got into the heads of the sideline, or they were kind of trying to try something new. But to me, they're not the game. They're not the types of games that you kind of try to try new things in. I think you have to make sure the result is the only thing that you're worried about.
Sure. Now, before we recorded, I listened back to our episode from last March, and your crystal ball was working overtime that day, Shauna. There's a If anyone wants to listen back to it, I think it's episode 6. A lot of what Shauna said that on that hour-long chat back in March was fairly on the money as to where we've ended up now. One of the key things you mentioned that day, Shauna, was that the fact that the defence that we had squad-wise, I think we both said this, just looked a little bit light in places. Now, when you consider Shels played 22 league games, scored 70 goals, but still didn't win the league, lost 6 games, as you said. So up top, we seem to be on fire. Kate Mooney was in great form before her unfortunate injury. Mackenzie Anthony had a great season. But, as we said on that episode, the two of us, two old school defenders, love a good hard tackle. But that's really where the old saying, you win or lose leagues or titles in your defence. But surely that's a key area for the new management team to focus on.
Yeah, definitely. I think great teams are built on strong defenses. You really need to have. I personally think you need to have a strong central partnership. Or I know at times Owen like to go with three at the back. Or whether that's three or four. I think you have to have at least two of those players that are playing together weekly, have a really good, kind of relationship. When I think back to kind of 2016 under Sean Maher, I was playing alongside in that position alongside Niamh Walsh. Niamh Walsh wasn't a player that would have been on the books or in the getting the attention of the international setup, but she was a phenomenal centre half and someone that I partnered really well with. But Sean made us work on that constantly, and he kind of pushed us to develop that relationship, and we kind of had different strengths that complemented each other. And I think at times we were light in defence, definitely, but I think there was a little bit of changing as well. We were seeing a lot of changes with Leah Doyle to Lucy O'Rourke to Kiva Keenan to Jess Gargan to Nia coming in with Pearl. And I think if there's anywhere that there needs to be stability, it's in the back line, within a football team. And yeah, over the course of the season, I think there was just too many changes, too many different kind of setups there, and moving pieces in terms of players. And I think the other thing as well is, like, maybe look at some of the other defences. We've incredible footballers. We've like the likes of Jess Gargan, who's has real attacking quality as a fullback. Kiva Keenan, as well. Leah Doyle on the other side, but sometimes you just need to have that kind of centre half in your team that likes to defend. And I think we've probably been missing that type of character as well over the course of the year.
Those players used to be called Seana Cooks.
I don't know. I was a bit of
Chopper.
a naive tackler, yeah.
Well, yeah. Look, we know the last game was a bit of a fiasco out in Tala, conceding 5 goals, but that then left us with conceded 25 goals in 22 games. So it took our average just above conceding 1 goal a game and 0 draws. So look, there are fine margins, but there's definitely certainly room to improve. Sean, I'm gonna sprinkle in some questions here because if I keep chatting, we'll be here till 10 o'clock tonight. So feel free to jump in. Before we get in, I'm just gonna ask 1 or 2 questions before we get into the managerial news this week. Is Shelbourne still seen as the club everyone wants to play for? Has the standard of football increased in the women's Premier Division, in Shauna's opinion? 2 quick questions there from
Yeah, I
emails.
suppose. Yeah, so I think the first one, like as much as it kills me to say now, I don't think
Really? Wow.
the team is kind of seen as the what I'd call the pinnacle, or the team that everyone else wants to play for. And again, I just think that we've probably got caught a little bit too much kind of focusing on what we've just achieved, um, and not like not looking at, okay, we've won that thing, now let's look how we can build on this for next year. It is tiring, it is endless. I've spoke to many people who've got involved in women's football thinking it was going to be easy, and after a couple of months they've turned around to me and said, oh my god, it's relentless. It's so difficult, to kind of, you're constantly thinking about the next season, the next game, the next couple of weeks.
Is that sorry, Sean? Is that players or coaches or
No,
everyone?
just coaches or just general people getting involved. I
Do they
think,
not realise this is close to the top level of
yeah,
football?
but see, I think that's where the mistake is. I think sometimes coaches and people see it as like an entryway, as in, oh, this will be a good opportunity for me to step into football at that level, and I'll be able to push on from there because, I've had experience in the men's game, or I've come from this different area of football. But there's a lot of nuances in women's football, and it is challenging. And I think as well, there's also sometimes a lack of appreciation or perception about the level of mentality that the females have within the game. Like, there's a lot of players across our league that have real high standards and professional mindsets, that demand that of their management team as well. So, look, I think other clubs have caught up to Shels. Like, I know Galway are still we're still kind of looking in the rearview mirror at Galway, but I do think in terms of the resources and what they're doing, that they've been chipping away. They can offer players a really good kind of, opportunity, as well, to kind of earn and play football, and the setup is really good. We're seeing Athlon's approach. I know there's kind of heavy emphasis on the fact that they're bringing in players from abroad, but also we look at the young players that have come through there. Kaylee Shine, for me, the best player in the league, by a long shot. Look at Izzy Ryan, Roisin Malloy. They still have a real core of strong home-based players there. So I think they're kind of catching the attention of players across the league now as maybe, a setup to keep an eye on. And then, I think Rovers as well, masterstroke from them to Point Steph. We all know the resources they have, the setup they have there. And I just think it's a matter of time before something clicks there, and things start to kind of progress. And unfortunately, there's now opportunity, especially in women's football now, how fast everything's evolving, to kind of just stop and admire what you've achieved. You have to constantly be pushing for better. And the moment you do stop, is the moment you're bypassed. And yeah, it does hurt me a little bit to say it, but I can definitely see that across the league, that years ago we would have had a lot of players contacting you kind of at the end of the season, about Shels, like, what's happening there? Do you know someone I can talk to? Are they looking for a centre half? Are they, whereas, nowadays kind of almost the opposite, where I'm saying to players, would you not consider going to Shels, so yeah, times are changing, Andy.
Get you. And just on that second point, has the standard increased since we in the season gone by? Do you think? I asked you the same question about 6 months ago. Before
Yeah.
looking back on last year in 2024, is it still much of a muchness?
Look, I'm going to again just call on my recent experience, because I was asked this question after the final on Sunday, and like I think in terms of the numbers of players we have and the interest is phenomenal now. It's great to see the game growing in certain ways, but I personally just think there's a real lack of technicality, and kind of what I call creative problem solving with players. Like nowadays, they're just not spending enough time with the ball. Um, you know, I personally don't think it's enough to go to kind of rely on your 3 nights training a week with your club, and then I don't know if you're doing one or two kind of one-on-one sessions. But like, you have to want to be around the football as much as you can. That's for me one issue. And like, I noticed it in the game, the final on Saturday, and it's been kind of a running theme over the course of this season and last season. The amount of times players are playing with their head down. You play with your head down when you're not comfortable with the ball, when you haven't got that kind of connection with a football, where you don't need to look at it as much. Um, we're seeing just even general, like the two goals that Lown got on the two first goals they got on Sunday, like the same thing happening twice. And there's a moment where the fullback kind of is engaged in dialogue with the lion. You know, Nowadays I think players are constantly waiting for direction from the bench. I think there's an element of that where the coaching is overprescribed now. There's this almost like coaches are over coaching. They want to control everything in the game, as opposed to teaching players how to control things and impact the game in different scenarios. Um, so I think in terms of, it's great to see the level of interest gone up, from females to play football. But I think in terms of the how a lot of players are being coached right now, and them not spending enough time with the football, I would say, has definitely impacted the quality across the league.
Julianne Russell, you mentioned to us before, was probably Ireland's best player. Was it last year before she hung up her
Yeah,
boots? And you mentioned that she did additional training, additional work with boys teams.
yeah,
And when you consider, I think Julianne was in her early 30s at that stage, which still only a young lady, but you can see how it improved her
yeah,
technique even at that stage, and then the actual net results on the field. I was at the cup final as well on Sunday, pitch side on certain duties, and I did actually notice that I won't name which team. I don't want to be unfair to anyone, but the instructions from coach to player was something I'd probably tell my 8-year-old.
yeah.
Go tight. All these little things. You need to get
Mhm.
tighter. Surely, if these 17, 18, 19, even older players are playing at that level, the focus has to be on what's in front of them instead of constantly being told from the side.
Yeah,
You can see them cupping their ears sometimes, saying, "What are you saying? What are you saying?"
yeah,
I to me, look, instructions should be short and direct and clear. There seems to be
yeah,
a lot of coaches across. Not maybe that's unfair. Not a lot of coaches, but certainly the message getting to players is sometimes obviously not clear, or the players stuff that you would expect to have been worked on in training is still
yeah.
not being delivered.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I have my own opinions on kind of. I personally think there's coaching courses are too accessible nowadays, especially at certain levels. And I think that kind of then impacts the quality of coaching that players are getting. And I think just as well, with everybody's a content creator nowadays as well. So sometimes it does feel like, there's an element there of coaches maybe watching the Premiership on a Saturday or Sunday, and then maybe trying to recreate things for themselves when they come to their own team, to be able to kind of talk about it. But yeah, look, I think once a match day comes around, once that 90 minutes starts, as a coach, like, there's little that you can do or should really want to do to impact the game. You should be able to trust your players to make those decisions. And I was asked that about like, even though as when we're looking at Shels, like we haven't maybe had that dominance in recent years that we'd be used to. But I think the one thing that's maybe carried us through in recent years is the fact that we have players on the pitch that have been brought up to make decisions. And, you've got the likes of Pearl and Rachel, Noelle, even like you'll see it in, I think, in the likes of Jess Gargan, where when they're on the pitch, they're not afraid to. It's not that you're going against your manager or what you've been asked to do, but for what's going on in the game to say to in Jess's situation, she might have to say to the player in front of her, I need you to come back and cover. There's an overload here, and just do it until we get to half time, and then we can sort it out. Instead of kind of going, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to look over at the bench and hope to hear something. So I think that's kind of been one of our saving graces over the past couple of years. But as I said, I do think the nature and the way coaching is happening now, that's changing across the league.
Right, well, let's talk about something that is changing across the league. Seana, as we said, we had to pencil you in earlier in the week because you're such a busy person with your TV shows and your podcasts and everything else. But Monday evening, Eoin Wearen's 2-year reign came to an end. I actually, for some reason, thought he had another year to go, but no, his contract was up. One trophy from a possible 6 across 2 years, 2 runners-up places. He did win the President's Cup, so we'll give him that. But were you surprised Monday night when the announcement was made?
Yeah, I think from like Owen's perspective, obviously like winning the FAI Cup last year, I think papered over a couple of cracks. And again, like, it can be difficult as a manager kind of coming out of a tough season, a lot of ups and downs. But I do think there needs to be people in the background that are kind of focused on the strategy part of it. Okay, yeah, we're over that now. Let's look to the future. I'm not sure if Owen kind of has that, or he took it on himself or whatnot, but it didn't kind of feel like that happened leading into this year. Was I surprised? To be honest with you, like I was surprised because knowing like obviously the club this year, everything that's happened with Duff, that was a massive period of time. I thought the way the club navigated that, specifically Neil Doyle, was fantastic. But like, nonetheless, like that took an awful lot of kind of management and focus, and the fact that we've progressed through to the Europa Conference League, like it is a real critical time for the club, and it's we're not a massive club, so we haven't got tons of people in the background. Like there's a very active team behind the scenes, leadership team, trying to kind of make sure everything's moving along. So I was surprised in a sense that like I had kind of thought that maybe the reality would be that they wouldn't be happy with how the season went, but maybe go, look, we've so much going on right now. It would be best just if we didn't create another headache for ourselves to go out and have to recruit for the women's team manager. So I was surprised that they had made the decision to kind of part ways. Was I surprised from the point of view of the fact that I thought a management change was needed? No, I wasn't surprised by that. It's kind of, I mean, I won't hide behind, and I haven't hid behind the fact that I was probably one of a good number of people that questioned the appointment in the first place. So I speak the truth. I don't hide behind things. That's not to say that I didn't support the team. I'll always support the team and whatnot over whoever's picked, and be there as much as I can in Talca Park and do as much as I can to advocate for the women's team. But yeah, I wasn't surprised in the fact that I think for me it's kind of, it was on the cards as the season progressed that it wasn't going to end in a particularly positive way. But I was, as I said, I was surprised that the kind of board had made the decision.
Yeah, it was quite swift. I don't think we know yet in regards to the background team there, Shauna, i.e. Rory Kirk and so on. So not too sure the position of Rory and everyone else. But another key thing that we spoke about, you mentioned the word there, strategy. Is the, I don't want to be down in the dumps here, but finishing second, as you said, for some clubs, getting to a cup semi final is it's it's decent. But as I said to Donny in our podcast the other day, the fact that we now hold the women's team in such high regard means that they're held to the highest standards, and I expect us to be scrapping for absolutely everything and really challenging. We've left a lot of trophies behind. That's something I've said a few times. I think we have. But is there something not behind the scenes, but something just under the hood in terms of the club's philosophy or strategy, bringing in true players? Because was the start of our problems potentially done this time last year when we lost three or four key younger players, or is that too simple just to point it at that sort of player pathway that we're just not seeing these guys coming through?
No, not at all. I think in terms of like you're talking about kind of management there and strategies, like I again not gonna hide behind it, anything. Like I firmly believe that like with Alan gone, there needs to be a clean sweep. I think, it would be so important that we kind of step forward and whoever comes in has kind of a new management. I don't think it would be fair to say that everything that kind of went wrong is just Alan's fault. And there's a lot out of his control. But I do believe that as a management team, like that's kind of carried on through the Niall King era into this. It hasn't worked, so I just think in terms of for women's football, I think it would be good for just a complete fresh approach, across the board. I do think there's kind of, I suppose, two aspects of strategy that I see that's needed. There's obviously the kind of wider club strategy that the women's team has to fall under. But then I do think again with the maturity level of women's football in Ireland, what we know that's happening in other countries in the direction that we're faced with, I do think we need like a strategy lead that's just kind of focused on the women's team. Nothing to do with what's going on the pitch and getting results, but actually looking at it through a strategic lens in terms of like I constantly talk about Paul Green at Chelsea, who was there with Emma Hayes and he's still there now at Sonia, and his focus is on looking about what type of players they want to bring into the first team, dipping into the academy, getting those players ready, but then also looking at kind of, in terms of like 6 months to 12 months out from that perspective of players. And I think that's kind of been missing. Like, one of the things for me is like, and I think I didn't know Owen before he got the job with the women's team. And I mean, I still don't know him on a personal level at all, just obviously as a coach with the women's team. But I know there was a few eyebrows raised with parents that had been involved in the under 17s and the underage teams when the lads were appointed. Now, to me, that would be a little bit of a red flag because, they would have been working with these younger players. So, there was obviously some questions there, or, I'm not saying parents are right, but I do think it's important to listen to people and have those conversations before making decisions and kind of just getting a gut check and read the room.
Shauna, is that in terms of their ability to step up to a senior level?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I definitely to just think there was maybe a question of their experience level and like if they were really kind of invested in women's football here at the club. Now again, I can't speak to that because I wasn't there all the time. I'm not involved in any official capacity, but I think for me, again, from a strategic point of view, recruiting for a role in women's football, like I told you, I had a conversation with Kieran McCormick a few weeks ago about this. Like for me, like we're not at a stage yet where we're able to just go out and bring in a manager who just focuses on the women's team and that's it. Like women's football in Ireland, specifically women's football in Ireland, like we need more Damien Duffs. And when I say that, I mean when Damien came into Shels, and you could tell by the way he spoke a lot, it was about he didn't just want to have a successful team. He wanted to build structures to develop a philosophy and improve kind of an aspect of the club as a whole. And that's what we need in women's football. We need people that are going to step into the senior management role and go, this isn't a stepping stone for me. It's not just about winning a trophy. It's about being able to shape women's football in this club and doing the things that are necessary to kind of, build out a strong philosophy. And I don't think we've had that in the past couple of people we've had in the role. They've been just solely focused on the first team, and that disconnection, I think, between the academy and the first team has grown. Um, Through the past couple of years, I've definitely seen like an erosion of identity in terms of how we play or are used to playing. Um, and I think it kind of continued through to this year. But again, I think that comes from somebody who is kind of fully invested in, I'm here, I want this to be successful, but I also want these young players to come through and have that pathway. So it was really disappointing to lose those younger players. And you're asking me there about the club's philosophy. I think I know that there was questions or there was thoughts about like, oh, are we as a club going to maybe go that way that Athlone have gone with maybe bringing in more like North Americans. I don't know whether that's still the case or not, but I think in terms of, I know a couple of people had mentioned Owen had kind of planned to maybe increase the numbers of North Americans for next season. But like for me, I think maybe that's a strong message from the club. I don't know if Owen had met them and put that kind of strategy forward to them and they had said, no, look, we want to go in a different direction and kind of dip into our academy. I'm 100% back in that. I haven't met Neil Doyle yet, but like from the work I've seen he's done around the club, and like I've seen him around Tolka Park and at the women's matches. I know he's interested in it. I have full faith that they'll kind of make the right decision for the women's team moving forward. And I what I'm gathering from this decision is maybe the philosophy is that they do want to have a stronger connection with the academy as opposed to dipping into players from abroad.
Yeah, that's interesting. Would that could that potentially mean, Sean, that Shels go into a year or two of a little bit of a transition, and that we may have to just accept that? Or as you said, I've had many dealings with Neil Doyle. I've been very impressed with him, and I do know that his focus is more is so not more, but is equally as on the women's side of things as possible. You mentioned bringing in somebody to really focus on the women's side of the game at the club. Are these people out there? Is it like just going out and take your pick, or do we have to go and sort of headhunt people? Like I don't want to name anyone unfairly here, but if you look at some of the players who've stepped away from the game recently, like your Karen Duggins, for example, would that be
Yeah.
Karen's sort of cup of tea, or would we be looking at someone who may have done this, who has a proven track record in implementing that sort of strategy at a women's club?
Yeah, I definitely think there's people out there. The reality is like if you're not going to pay people, or you're going to kind of have it as a volunteer low paying role, you're going to get the level that equates to. That's the reality. So like,
It's a full
you know,
time gig, isn't it, Shauna? It's like it's not a 9 to 5. These are full time, flat
yeah,
out roles.
yeah, and I think like we're still kind of missing those roles within women's football in Ireland across the different clubs. Um, and it's great having someone like Kira McCormick involved in Treaty because naturally, coming from the women's game, I think she has that kind of hat on already. But like, I do think that clubs need to have people like the men's game is completely different to the women's game. Like I will watch Shell's men's team on a Friday night and I'll watch the women's team on a Saturday. And that's my like I say to my partner, like that's it. Like don't organize anything, don't bother me, don't like just leave me be for those 2 days. Um, but like I'll watch Champions League games with the for the men's, but like I couldn't tell you in terms of certain aspects of how the men's game works because it's a completely different beast. I can tell you how the women's game works because I've played in it. I've spent so much time around it. And I think that's what we need to bring into the game more here is people who have the kind of working experience within the women's game are also passionate about it or like really want to push it on. So I do think those people are out there, but it's not about going out and going, look, we want you to come and help, but like we're not going to pay anything. This is just be a great thing for you to have in your CV, or we are going to pay, but it's going to be really crappy. If you're serious about women's football, I think you have to kind of put the numbers behind the roles you're creating and get the kind of right people in. And I look with that as well. I think what happens there is you're able to create KPIs and you're able to hold people accountable for things. Over the course of a season or, a set of years.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting. Shels would have got their recent LOI Academy audits back, which I was something I was involved with during the summer, and then have their specific ones for the female women's side. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any key findings in that. Something I haven't seen, but be interesting. Now, Shauna, more questions. You're not the only royalty on today's show. We had your toe tap last Thomas, real royalty, Eileen Ring. Can't believe Eileen has lowered her standards to reach out to a Shelburne podcast. But Eileen wants to know, would Shauna like to see an experienced manager like Eileen Gleeson being considered? Or would Eileen even be interested? She has a lot going on.
Yeah, like would I like to see, is like, just I suppose, again going back to what I've just said there in terms of like looking for people who have experience in women's football, have experience at the top end of women's football, like as in actually maybe played or managed at the top levels. Um, I think that is critical to the appointment. Um, I'm not sure if Eileen would be the right person, just because obviously there's a lot of baggage there at the moment with what's going on with the FAI and Eileen. Like there's a lot of questions about like what Eileen actually done when she was the head of football, previous to the taking the women's team manager role. Um, so I definitely think we need somebody that has the experience and the passion that Eileen has. Whether or not it's the right time for someone like Eileen, I would probably just have questions about that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's clear as mud, as usual. But we have other similar questions. Mark Fraser, is it time for a female manager? That's probably, what do you think, Shauna? Is there a ready-made female manager out there? I think you've got Emma Hayes on speed dial, I think, do you?
Yeah, like look, I think for me, I've said this like week in week out, to different people on different platforms. Like Laura Heffernan is a really strong candidate, and I do believe if she was a male, she'd be like she would be so in demand. We probably would have seen her at somewhere like Rovers or at Loan or whatnot. I think Shels missed a beat a couple of years ago by not giving her the role. And you're talking about a transitioning period. I think that again should have happened a couple of years ago. Giving it to Laura allowed her, like, she has such a good relationship, and she's like, I can speak on behalf of this because I got to work alongside Laura. Her coaching, how she coaches, how she talks to people is incredible. I was so impressed with her, and people know I'm very hard to impress. But like, she was just incredible. She made me a better person just because she would pull me up on things, help me kind of rephrase things, and I just learned a lot from my time with her. I think Laura is an exceptional candidate. I can imagine that DLR would just kind of let her leave. As far as I know, she's under contract, but I do think if it is to be a female, I probably wouldn't look much further than Laura at this moment in time.
Interesting. Another interesting question here, Shauna, is regarding, should Shels dig deep financially to bring in key players such as Aoife Kelly? That's from Ian O'Dowd. I know you're an Aoife Kelly fan, as am I.
Yeah, Aoife. Look, when Aoife Kelly was at Shels, she was brilliant. She went to Rovers, again showed her promise. She probably had more of a quieter season with Wexford. I probably again was a person that had questions about her going there. I think she's fantastic, but is she the finished article now? And because our league has maybe a younger age profile in comparison to other senior leagues across Europe, again, whoever's in that role has to get that balance right of kind of driving a team to succeed and win trophies and develop players. I think over the course of the past few seasons, unfortunately, we haven't got that balance right at all. And throwing players into play games and development, it's about seeing how they progress over the course of a season, seeing how they're growing in different areas of their game. I think definitely the club need to kind of look at bringing in some players for sure. You know, I would love to see some of those players that left come back. I'm a big fan of Ava Brennan. I think she's phenomenal, for me, the best midfielder in the league at the moment. Um, there's other players out there, but I wouldn't just be going throwing big money just to get players into the club again. I value teammates, and I know within a Shels dressing room, like, it's important that people want to be at Shelbourne, they want to play for the club. Like, we have an amazing fan base. People turn up, hail, rain, snow. They deserve players that want to play for Shelbourne and aren't just kind of here because they're getting a few extra quid or it's a stepping stone to England.
I agree. If you look at our double winning champions now. Last year on the eve, I think was it the week before the President's Cup, maybe, Athlone announced about 78 players. Just I think you even said they just stopped short of announcing Pope Leo. Do you remember that, Shauna?
Yeah, yeah,
And I wonder now, like, Athlone, I think their model really is that, as you said, they do have a sprinkling of fine local talent, but is there potential for them now to lose a lot of these sort of stateside players and then see the next wave coming in? Because I know the new owner, Nick Giannotti, an interesting gentleman who I had the pleasure of chatting to on Sunday. He seems to have gotten the bug
mm.
of League of Ireland football. Could Athlone be somewhat of a force for the next few years? Or will Shels, as I mentioned earlier, will Shels have to possibly dig deep financially to try and compete?
I definitely think there's going to be a turnover of players there. Just the nature of, I think, North American players, they want to come over here and experience the Champions League or European football, and they see it as an opportunity to maybe have that on their CV to then go back to their own leagues. And, we've seen how it even benefited the players from Treaty that played last year, that moved on this year, that, are earning very good salaries in the Canadian League. So having that international experience kind of on your CV as a North American can definitely benefit you in opportunities when you kind of go back home in such a competitive environment over there. So I definitely think you won't. There's not going to be that stability in terms of player for player from Athlone from this season to next season. I look, for me, there's only two players out of that group that I think they really need to work hard to keep. That's Kelly Brady and Waite. I don't think the rest of them have had that big of an impact. That we would have expected. So for me, like, I constantly talk about ROI. Bringing a player over, housing them, paying them everything else that you have to cover while they're here. Like, that has to be measured against data, how many minutes they played, the impact they had in those games, things like that, assists, goals, whatnot. So I would expect to see change at Clown. The other thing there is I don't think they've really steadied the ship with the kind of situation that happened with Colin Fortune. And I will say, I think the club made the complete right decision there. I don't think any manager in the course of the season should be making demands about their future when, again, we talk about doing things for the good of the women's team and the game. To do something like that at a critical point in time, I thought was selfish. And for me, I think the club Athlone made the right decision. But for them, obviously that lingered. And then, the appointment of John Sullivan has obviously given them some stability. I think it was important for them to have someone in place before the off season happened. So I don't know the owners there, so I can't speak to their philosophy moving into next season. I can imagine that they'll probably have to go back to the well again and see can they bring in some new faces. But when I look at their bench in terms of some of the younger players they have, Donegan, Izzy Ryan, Kira O'Neill, like, I'd be working hard to try and keep them because, like a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about Kaylee Shine, and only for the fact that she got that opportunity to step up and play. She's become a really, really, really strong centre half. So they have good people in the background there that are obviously developing players and are doing it well. So I don't see why they can't maybe, I think, put the percentages towards their academy versus the North Americans.
Yep. That's to be decided there in the Midlands. So Shels are not the only club, as it stands, showing a managerless. There's a bit of a end of season merry-go-round at the moment now. Laurie Ryan, I think, was announced treaty manager. Was it maybe last 10 days ago? You're a big fan of Laurie, aren't you? Are you happy to see her go in there?
Yeah, look, Laurie is a fantastic person. Like what she done at Athlone in terms of guiding them to success, was phenomenal. She obviously had to step away from the game to have a baby, but the passion is there. She really wants to kind of come in and make a difference. But away from football, I think she also has really strong. Like she's got the playing experience. We talk about having people involved that have that top level playing experience. She has that, and then she also has traits as she works in education, I think, to really hone in on the development side of young players, and I think that's important. I've had conversation with Laurie over the past couple of weeks, and we spoke about her kind of what she foresees moving into her management career, what she wants to do, who she wants to surround herself with, and yeah, like I think it's the right decision for Treaty, because as I said, Laurie's very passionate about women's football. She has that playing experience, and I think it's a great decision for Laurie. She was in two minds whether she wanted to go back into playing or management, but her heart kind of seemed to lie more on the coach and management side. And look, she comes strongly endorsed by someone like Kieran Kilduff, so say no more.
Yeah, that's a good person to have in your corner. So, Shauna, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but by the looks of it, Shells, Peamount, Cork City, Sligo Rovers, and potentially Shamrock Rovers. I'm not sure their situation is with Stephanie Roach. They're all without full time managers now. That may have changed the last couple of days, but there's a lot going on there. I know, like in Cork, for example, I think Frank Kelleher stepped away, and was it Craig Robinson stepped in for the final month or
Yeah.
two. So they've got stuff to sort out.
I
Peamount,
think they, I think
uh,
they've appointed. I think they appointed Barry Ryan.
oh, was
If
it confirmed? Okay, okay. Well,
yeah, yeah,
I need to sharpen up my notes. So, well, there you
yeah.
go.
No, no, no. Again, I think just the nature of women's football, these things sometimes aren't as widely known as we're used to with the men's game.
Yeah, but it just shows again that you're going to have clubs battling to get in strong managers, and then some of these clubs won't really be able to do their business until they have these people in place. So we now face into a fairly long off season, so it's no huge urgency. But would you think Shells, for example, might have anyone in mind, or would you say just give yourself a few weeks just to think about things as to, in terms of where Shells want to go now? Because I'm sure they'll have plenty of applicants for the role, but this next appointment now really is key, because 3 league titles in 9 years, it's not great
No.
considering how highly we our expectations are.
Yeah, like again, just when you're talking there about, like, I think it's one of the issues sometimes in Irish football that I think I see a lot is this kind of concept of, like, you need to have a strong manager in to kind of attract players and there is an element of that for sure. But I think when you look at, and again from my experience of playing in England, like when I was at Arsenal, like there's a woman there called Claire Wheatley who's still there. Again, she looks at things more from a strategic perspective, from a management perspective, but Claire knows football. She knows what's needed. She knows how to go and kind of bring in the right people. And I think you know once you have that strategy in place and you have the right people in place, like it kind of lessens the impact of when a manager is fired or walks away. It's the ship isn't as rocky when you have those people in, because they're able to convince players based on being experienced and passionate about the game, that they're able to go and speak to parents and players and say, look, we will bring in the right person, but like we're still the same setup. We're still Arsenal. We're still the best women's team in the country. So I think that's something that we're missing at the moment within the women's like section, and we've been missing it for forever, I would say. So yeah, I think across the league that's missing. There is a reliance, and I think maybe unlike the men's game, there's elements of clubs that they're kind of like, I will let the manager do all that stuff when they get in, and they'll do recruitment and care about all that kind of stuff. I think the big worry is whether or not the level of manager needed is out there. Like there's, I think the position Shels are in, still a very strong club. I would hope that they're headhunting, as opposed to. I obviously know they have to open the role, but I would hope that they're kind of going out there and headhunting, and finding the right candidate. But to me, and again, just when we're talking about Owen and Rory, like I think you have to ask the question of who appointed them as well. So I think that's a bit of an issue. We have to look at in Shels, is making sure that the right people are making the right appointments for the right reasons.
Yeah. Did you probably heard of Jamestown Analytics, Shauna, who were the club linked up with in early 2025, and they are responsible probably most notably for bringing in James Norris and Vessel Spiel, I believe, on the men's side.
Yeah,
They have I think they sort of the Moneyball sort of approach where they look at all the key data and they say, well, this particular player would fit in here. I wonder, and I think it is club wide, so it'd be interesting to see now with if if that has any sort of impact into the women's team,
yeah,
because they have a lot of data, a lot of stuff that a lot of clubs, as you said, when they appoint people in the past, it's because you may know them, you may have treat them off their track record. But one thing that was very interesting that I saw during the League of Ireland Academy proposal, to government document that's publicly available, was that a lot of clubs do lack a key club philosophy as to what they want to
mm-hmm.
do. And then when you, as you said, a manager could come in for 10 years, he could come in for 10 months. The club as a whole should have the same philosophy throughout, because you
Yeah,
cannot change everything just for one person.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so I
yeah.
think you're spot on
Yeah,
with your
like
comments
if
there.
you speak to anyone around, if you were to go speak to any player that's playing for Arsenal, or that has played for Arsenal, whether it's a senior team right down to an under nines or tens. I only spoke to, like, I'm good friends with Renee, the manager at Arsenal. Like, and we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, there's a thing there called the Arsenal way, and everybody talks about it. It's the Arsenal, like, is that player acting in the Arsenal way? Are they playing in the Arsenal way? Did they have the traits that are needed to play the Arsenal way? And it's something I don't think we have here in football. And I think when you have that lack of experience appointing managers, it is quite transitionary. Like, you start to lose your identity, because a manager comes in, tries to kind of half put what they believe in place. It's not working because it's a maybe cultural clash with what's already existing in the club. So yeah, for me, I do believe everything starts with a culture and a philosophy. And as you said there, data is so important. It's not just that, like, we fall into the trap, I think, in women's football a lot of times of, like, going out and going, oh, we'll sign that player because they're an Irish international, or we'll sign that player because they're a North American. um, that's not how football works, and, like, you can look at a player on paper or in a highlights reel, and that's only one side of it. I think it's about actually looking at the data available, and, again, relying on people who have that experience that are able to tell you, you know, oh yeah, that player in that position is really highly effective, versus, you know, I could tell you, like, for example, and we're talking about Kaylee Shine, like, nowhere near an international setup, I don't think has ever been close to one. Best centre half in the league. In terms of, like, the amount of time she turns the ball over, carrying the ball out of backline, last minute tackles, like, phenomenal. But again, if you're inexperienced, you'll go, oh yeah, but she's not an international. Whereas, we want to bring in players that are at that level.
Yeah. We I think next season, 2026, we see the introduction, excuse me, of the second European competition for women. that suddenly, for me, really sharpens the mind now in terms of the next appointment, because that's where the riches are in terms of development as a club. For me personally, I want to see our women's team being in European competition, having those trips. You also mentioned, I recall that you said it would be great to have more Irish teams hosting European competitions, which we saw during the summer in Athlone, and they had some great success. So I think that's the sort of level I want us to see us pushing towards. But
Yeah,
Shauna, you've been wonderful as always with your time. I have some final questions for you, because
sure.
I know you're an incredibly busy woman, believe it or not. But
No worries.
we've maybe have covered some of these in areas, so feel free to skip over. Does Shauna see a lot of personnel changes in the squad? Sorry, personnel changes in the squad. Excuse me. Could Shauna give a definition when we hear the term naivety in team selection? Can you put us straight on that one, Shauna? What is naivete or naivety when it comes to a team selection?
Yeah, I suppose the first question, do I see turnover personnel? I don't really, because I think, like, there's a good team spirit amongst the players there. I would think there might be one or two changes for sure, but I see us probably bringing more players into the fold than what's leaving. Well, I hope that happens for sure. In terms of naivety and team selection, when you're, I say this again across the different kind of places I speak on, like the one thing a lot of managers I think fall into in this league is the way you play against Cork is very different to the way you're going to have to turn up and play against the Shamrock Rovers or a Bows or an Athlone. You can't just play the one way over and over again and play certain people. Like when you're coming up against an Athlone, where you're going to concede more chances, you probably need more defensive cover. For me, that kind of changes the personnel you're picking, potentially changes how you're asking players to play. You know, if I'm thinking about, like, Leah Doyle is an incredible attacking fullback. She really shows how good she is as an attacking fullback. But when we think about playing against Athlone and defending Roisin Malloy, you're probably looking at, all right, Akiva Keenan might be better suited to contain Roisin. Because we know if we contain Roisin for a certain period of time, she'll get frustrated, she'll lose her head. I'm not saying she's an aggressive player or anything, but she tends to dip in and out of the game. We've seen it on Sunday a little bit when she's not getting the ball. So how can we put her in that situation where she doesn't get the ball, she doesn't want the ball? So in terms of naivety and selection, I think it's about making sure that you're making the right decisions to set the team out tactically, but also in the personnel to overcome the challenge in front of you. And I think at times we've shown that we've made those mistakes of trying to maybe play the same personnel against different teams and to play the same way against different teams. And it just hasn't worked.
Yeah, I think we can all sort of, well, I can certainly picture those scenarios in my head, Shauna. So thanks for that
No worries.
definition. I've been educated today, that's for sure. Some final questions from Brian Curran. Brian sends us in questions every week, so I better read one of them. Courtney Maguire, will she ever get a fair chance to claim number one spot? Well, I
Yeah,
know she was injured for a lot of last year or last season, to be fair.
yeah, like that. I think she had a bit of a setback, which I was quite surprised, because I know, like, at one stage, I think Courtney's injury happened around the same time or just after Jamie Finn's, and she was almost back before, which I thought was a bit strange, considering, when you think of the
Yeah.
access that Jamie would have had over at a club like Birmingham to medical care and whatnot. So I was a bit like, oh, she's back very early, and then all of a sudden she was out again for a long period of time. She obviously deserves an opportunity for sure. I don't know whether, again, and it's not a slight at Courtney, I've seen her play some phenomenal games. She was a player that was involved in Laura Heffernan's under 17s team at Shels, and she showed real potential then. But I don't know whether, she's at that level to challenge Amanda. I think there's some great goalkeepers across the country that are sitting on benches. Mirren at Galway is an example of one of those that I think, could be looking at for future. But I definitely think if the intention is that Courtney wants to stay and the new management come in and want her there, there's of course in terms of how the season has gone, I think definitely that number one position is up for grabs. I think Amanda, in fairness to her, knowing the type of mentality she is, she thrives off competition, and I think that would only push her on as well.
Yeah, I think Amanda has actually won the Golden Gloves. Sorry, Golden Gloves for her clean sheets this season, I think. So
Yeah,
she
yeah.
must be doing something right. Shauna, there was FAI League of Ireland announcement a few weeks ago about the restructuring. I think the under-19s is now forming into an under-23 league with additional tiers slash new teams coming into it. We had a question regarding your thoughts on that. Is it a step forward? Is it positive? And then I think with the recent announcement of the government funding the next year or so, there's going to be an under-15s women's division. This has a little bit of a mixed reaction for the under-23s, but does it plug that gap for players who are no longer, under-19s and are not getting first team football?
I don't think, in my opinion, it's the best move. I think it was probably one that was almost forced. You were seeing the US, Emma Hayes brought back the under 23s over there, and it makes complete sense in terms of the quality, not just the number of players they have, but the quality that they have. I don't think we have that quality yet. What I do think is it will be great if we do see more players playing for that kind of extra period of time. I can just see what'll happen is those players that maybe potentially were under 19s will just play at the older level. And I don't see it being the answer. I think what we need to do is look at a more holistic approach. A big issue we have here again is players not playing enough, not spending enough time with the ball. Like Carla Ward spoke about it still being a part-time approach across the country. So for me, we're not going to push the needle until we actually start looking at, proper full-time training for teams. And I don't care if that is only at this moment in time for the next couple of years, just the teams that are playing at in the Women's National League right now, and we expanded after that. But I just don't think our product as a whole is where it needs to be before we start kind of looking at how we expand other leagues. And nobody wants to go out, like no fans enjoy going out and watching a 6 or 7-0 or 8-0 game. That's not going to move women's football on. We need competitive, high quality football week in, week out across the country.
Great. And last one, Shauna, before we let you get back to your busy
Back to
day.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, Ciara O'Reilly. Thanks, Ciara. If Shauna, well, I mean, which way she worded, she goes, what 2 or 3 key players would Shauna go after if she had the budget? You've mentioned 1 or 2 already, Shauna, but
Yeah, well, like I suppose a disclaimer, please, parents or coaches from other clubs, don't get onto me after this and give out to me. Why did you say her name? If I was going after players, there would be, I think this would be my opinion of the 4 players that I would bring in. The first one would be, as I said, the likes of Eoin from Galway. I think she showed real promise when she was playing for Wexford in goal. Definitely has a bright future. Has spent quite a bit of time on the bench. So I'd be trying to get her in. Mary Phillips, I think, at Peamount Quality Centre. I don't think we have a hope of getting Kaylee Shine just because she seems to bleed black and blue. So I think next best for me is Mary Phillips. I think she showed real promise of being able to play centre half and in
yeah,
the
super
defensive
player.
midfield role. Yeah, really strong, athletic player. The next one, I do think we need a midfielder like an Ava Brennan. Really good on the ball, likes playing in tight players, but also has that engine. For me, she's the future of Irish football in terms of how she plays. And then on top of that, my last player, and it'd be one of these 2, I'd be going after Eleanor Ryan Doyle or Emma Doherty, just because I think they're both proven goal scorers, but I just think they show real promise in terms of being able to play in different tactical setups.
That's not a bad wish list at all,
Yeah,
Shauna.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Look,
yeah,
it be difficult players to get because they're all obviously in demand, and I'm sure every club will be looking at them.
yeah. But look, we wait and see what happens. So, Shauna, thanks so much for everything. We got a long off season to wait. At least the Shels men's team will keep us ticking over for the
Yeah,
next few weeks anyway. Just very last question before I let you go. How do you see the club's health in general as to we you've been around a long time as have I, but
yeah.
you're positive overall about how the club is in good health.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Look, I think everybody knows I've got the reputation for being a bit outspoken, but I'll always just speak my truth, and it's never for my own gain. It's always just because I'm passionate about women's football. I'm passionate about Shelbourne Football Club as a whole. So I've definitely spoke my mind over the course of the past few years, and it's been met with both criticism and debate. But I firmly believe in terms of the appointments, the people that I've spoke to, the people that are behind the scenes in terms of I don't want to name names, but Neil Doyle, Brian McGovern, even Tomas, the CEO now. I do think from my speaking to Brian, the likes of Tomas, like I can see their passion, their vision. I do believe that the club is in a really good place. Obviously the women's team, we've been on a little bit of a track that we haven't wanted to be on, but like what I will ask is for people to stick with them. Like the players deserve that. They deserve the support, and as I said, I trust that the likes of Neil, Brian, Tomas will find the right candidate. And like it's an exciting time, although you can be kind of going, oh no, what's going to happen. I do think these moments um are also exciting because it almost feels like a new dawn. We're stepping into, and I think those lads are the right people to kind of guide that process forward. So for me, I think across the board from men's to women's, we're in good shape. We're in good shape, and like I think it's a great time to be a Shelbourne fan at the moment, and you know, long may it last.
Yep, these are the glory days, Shauna. Is there any chance of Seana Cooke being the Damien Duff announcement that we saw 3 or 4 years ago for the women's team?
Oh,
Any
not at
chance?
all. No, I mean, I coaching isn't for me. Management isn't for me. I just, I, I definitely haven't got the personality for it. I like operating more on that kind of strategic behind the scenes, kind of area of football clubs. But look, we've seen the quality, coaches that are existing are coming out of the game now. So I've no doubt that the right person is out there, and hopefully we'll hear about them in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, well said. Well, Shauna, what a pleasure it is to have you with us again on the show. We shall hopefully have you back before the start of next season, which seems a long way away. But in the meantime, you're always welcome back on the show for anything you want to discuss. Your listener numbers always go up in Shauna Cooke's in town, that's for sure.
No, thanks, Andy. As I said, thanks to yourself, Dunny, and all the guests you've had on. It's not being a female involved in football. It can be kind of difficult week in, week out, especially when there's a lot of mainstream media just not giving the women's league the coverage that it deserves. So we appreciate everything that you do and have done over the course of the season. And yeah, it's just great to hear more and more discussions about women's football. Warts and all, it's important these conversations happen. So thank you so much, and I look forward to being an avid listener moving into next season as well.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Shauna. We do it because we love it, and it means a lot to everyone and to ourselves. So look, that's it. Thanks for episode 41, Shauna. We'll wish you well, speak to you very soon, and to everyone, we shall speak to you all next week.